Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
All right. I think there's still some people that are joining. So we're going to get things going today with some brief introductions from our panelists. I'm just going to go in order that you all have shown up on my screen. So ML, if you could start us off with a short intro, that would be awesome.
Hi, I'm ML. I work in education with Just a VA. I am class of 2018 at Macalester. I studied English Lit and critical theory, kind of. And I currently work at Friendship Academy of the Arts, which is a tiny little public charter in South Minneapolis doing comms and fundraising. But I also have tutored extensively, work as an avid tutor in Minneapolis Public Schools. And this summer I'll be starting at Urban Teachers, which is a grad program, very long 4-year grad program for people that want to be really great teachers in DC, and it's through Johns Hopkins. So that is what I do.
Thank you. Ella, if you could give your intro.
Oh.
Ella might be frozen. Let's move on to Carolyn.
I graduated in 2018. I'm an associate educator at Seward Montessori School in Minneapolis Public Schools.
Ella, you're cutting out a little bit.
Looks like my internet not great. Can people hear me?
A little bit.
A little.
All right, let's see. Okay. It says my internet not great.
Ella, I think we're gonna
Can you hear me now?
we can hear you a little bit, but it's kind of cutting out. I wonder, do you want to sign off and sign back in?
Someone else could go to contact me.
Okay, let's move on to Carolyn. Hopefully she makes it back in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, can you all hear me okay? Am I lagging or anything?
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So my name is Carolyn. I'm also the class of 2018. And at Macalester, I double majored in linguistics and Spanish. And after graduating, I spent 1 year teaching English in South Korea to students in grades 3 through 9. And so I only had like 1 year in education, but I plan on going into, like as a career, going into international education after I get a PhD. So as of right now, I have 1 year of teaching English abroad that I bring to this group.
Oh, also, I forgot my pronouns. They're she, her.
Oh yeah, I also use she, her, hers. Good call. Good catch.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go back to Ella. Looks like she's back.
Okay. Is this okay? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, much better.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, great. Yeah, my name's Ella. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently an associate educator at Seward Montessori School in Minneapolis Public Schools. I work with first through third graders in mixed first through third grade classrooms. And last year I was a 7th English language learning coach, sort of. So I worked in the 7th grade classroom with English language learners and did like social emotional parent contact stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're cutting out a little bit again, but that time was better for sure. Let's move on. Hillis?
Okay.
Hello. Hi, I'm Hillis Burns. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Macalester class of 2012. Maybe the oldest here. So I've got a longer period of time to describe my my background. I graduated with a BA in geology, and kind of realized that I didn't want to do geology, so I ended up working as a math and science tutor, and I was self-employed for a couple of years. I also graduating in 2012, there were not a lot of jobs available. It was, send out 100 resumes and hear nothing back kind of time period. Not as bad as 2009, but still not great. So I ended up teaching English in China for a year, which was a really great experience. And when I came back, my then boyfriend, now husband, is a math and special ed teacher for Minneapolis Public Schools. And he said, well, why don't you try, I was looking for a job. He said, why don't you try being special ed assistant for a while, get a paycheck coming in while you're figuring out what you want to do. So I started at Minneapolis Public Schools in 2015, working with 18 to 21-year-olds with severe developmental disabilities and autism at Transition Plus. And that was a lot of work training, community-based education, that sort of thing. I was a teaching assistant. And then I ended up getting my master's degree at the University of St. Thomas. And so I have a special education license that allows me to teach K-12, actually K-21, students with autism, developmental disabilities, emotional and behavioral disabilities, learning disabilities, and other health disabilities. It's a broad cross-categorical license. So I'm in my second year of teaching. Last year I taught at Dowling Elementary in South Minneapolis, working with students with physical and health disabilities. And this year I am teaching students with developmental disabilities at Howe Elementary.
Great, thank you. And then let's move on, last but not least, to Jack.
Hello, I'm Jack Libresco. I graduated I use he, him pronouns. I graduated last year in 2019, and I'm actually in my classroom right now, I'm doing a bunch of distance learning stuff right now, so I come in once a week to prepare things for the kids. I'm getting ahead of myself. I teach at a public charter school in Richfield, Minnesota called Seven Hills Preparatory Academy. And I teach kindergarten through fourth grade. Latin and art are the two subjects. I'm a specialist teacher. Seven Hills was actually founded by a Macalester classics professor 15 years ago now, so that's kind of a cool connection. The middle school Latin teacher here is also a Macalester alumnus, Trey Maroka, if anyone knows him. I teach on a rotating schedule, so I do 2 days of Latin and then 2 days of art, and I have about 250 kids total. And I see half of them every day, and there's 2 classes at every grade level. So this is my first year teaching, and everyone tells me it's quite the strange year to start in.
Very strange, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. So I'm going to kick us off with just the first question. But after that, students, I'm going to open it up to you. You can feel free to ask questions using the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature, or you can kind of physically raise your hand in the square, and we'll go from there and move on with your questions. But my question, just to start us off, is what experience did you have while you were in college, either at Mac or outside of Mac, maybe in an internship or something like that, that really made you want to pursue education? And anyone can jump in. Yeah.
Yeah. I will always say this. I'm so obsessed with telling, Margaret's laughing. Breakthrough Collaborative. Do Breakthrough Collaborative. I was not going to teach. I did not ever want to be back into school ever, ever, ever. But I was thinking about being an academic. I thought that sounded cool. I was in over my head. That was wrong. For some people that is very mature, like Carolyn. But for me, it was not, for a lot of reasons. But I wanted to just get some teaching experience. But I was not thinking ever being back on the K-12 level. And I had heard through Macalester actually about this thing called the Breakthrough Collaborative. It's a summer program. You teach middle schoolers, and some of you may have done it actually, obviously, who could experience summer slide, who may not go to schools that are serving them fully, or just may not be in circumstances where they're being fully served. So mostly low-income students of color, right? So I applied and I taught at the New York site, And then I unexpectedly really loved it and was like, I'm obsessed with this. I'm obsessed with the kids. I'm obsessed with all of this. Can I do more of this? And it also really teaches you the nuts and bolts of how to teach. And there are a lot of summer teaching programs that do a great job of this, and a lot of summer teaching programs that do not really teach you how to teach and just kind of throw you in there. So it's a great way for somebody, especially somebody that is not studying education in undergrad the way that somebody at a more like pre-professional university might, to try something like Breakthrough. And even if you don't want to teach in the end, or you don't want to work in the classroom directly, it's a great way to dip your toes in and kind of get how it works. And it's a great community. So highly recommend.
I can jump in. So I have a non-answer to your question, which is I didn't think that I was interested at all in education. I was graduated and was totally directionless because I, had this major that had jobs available, and I realized that they didn't really fall in line with both ethical values and, life priorities. I didn't want to be on an oil well, out in the middle of nowhere. So I was really directionless when I graduated, and it was experiences afterwards that made me pursue education, stay in education. I'd say the big jump for me was getting from independent freelance work into public education, and that was really influenced by my spouse, who has been a public school teacher for 10 years or so. So I found it through post-Mac life.
All right, I can go next. Before even setting foot in Macalester, I had worked as a summer camp counselor at a camp for several years. And so teaching like outdoor skills and stuff to kids kind of got me into like, maybe this kind of thing is what I want to do. Maybe not necessarily be like a teacher, but some kind of Macalester. I was an orientation leader and an orientation coordinator, which were both roles that, again, while not exactly teaching, they were kind of like a mentorship role for incoming students, but for like it was a mentorship role, and that was an experience that taught me kind of how to be a leader of a group, and not so much like teaching skills, but how to like manage group dynamics and kind of that sort of side of it. And so that's the kind of experience I had at Macalester that kind of gave me a skill set that carried over into my year teaching abroad.
I could hop in. I didn't actually have much experience at all before jumping in. I was a preceptor at Mac, which was honestly pretty helpful experience. I precepted for Professor Annette Goldman in the classics department, and she was the that I just that she had the class 6 times during the semester, and that I just do it. So that was kind of my first jumping in. And then I feel pretty lucky now to be at a school that I have a coach at school, and it's part of a QComp program. So I'm every week with my coach, or I was every week with my coach, and she would come in, observe a lesson every week, and she did teaching, and we talk about how I could improve and all sorts of things like that. It was largely a jump in and on the job sort of training. So I think I'm lucky that I'm kind of a theatrical person in general, so that wasn't as scary as it might be for some people. But I think in looking for jobs, I think a lot of schools will say if they have a program like that, and that was a really helpful program for me.
Let's see if people can hear me, but I first became interested in education after taking education classes at Macalester. I just found that they were I loved the teachers and how they taught, and it makes sense that people who study pedagogy are going to have really well formatted and, easy, engaging classes, right? So the first class I took was, what was it called? Community Youth Development with Tina Cruz. And she's amazing. The class was really fun, and the class had an internship component. And so, yeah, it was it was spring semester my first year, and I got to go off campus and work at a community center with doing reading tutoring, I think 2 times a week, and I absolutely loved it. And so, I decided this is what brings me joy, and that's what I continue to pursue in school.
Thank you all. So I'm going to open it up to students now. So if you all want to either type your question in the chat or ask it using the mic, feel free to do that. Okay, it
We
looks
have
like
one question.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat. So it says, what was your process like to decide whether or not you wanted to go to grad school right after Mac? Do you feel like not having some kind of higher degree has been a challenge in any way? And I know you can all read that too, but just wanted to read it out loud. So if any panelist wants to jump in.
Not having a higher degree has definitely been a challenge. You graduate at Macalester, and even if you'd like to go into teaching, you don't have a teaching license. So that's another hoop that you need to jump through to make what I consider to be a livable salary. Right now, I'm an assistant teacher in the school, and my union is still fighting for higher wages. There's a separate union that includes special education assistants that make even less than I do, and that union is fighting for higher wages. I think it's definitely a hurdle not having a higher degree. Being in education with only a BA and a certificate, and it's made it so that over the past few years working in education, I've spent a lot of time trying to consider how I can keep working in education, what degree I can get so that I can have a career that is paid, essentially.
It's definitely, I would totally agree with Ella. It's definitely a hurdle, and I think is kind of not sustainable. Also, you kind of need to, within 3 years, sort of get a higher degree if you're going to be teaching in your own classroom. It's a cool thing. It's like a tiered lecture program. So if my school sponsored me to get a tier 1 license or this year, which I can do for I think 3 years, and then with that you can move up through the licensure ranks. So it is technically possible to keep teaching with just a bachelor's degree, but it definitely is a lot harder to. You'll be stuck in a lower salary band, and I think just on top of that, it is definitely a learning curve of if you didn't go through a master's program in like that has a lot of on-job training. It's definitely there's strategies and books and people there to help you, but I think it is something that I'm going to have to do in the next few years if I want to keep teaching.
I can say something on this. For me, I did not know if I wanted to go into education for sure. I wanted to make really, really sure because I knew that I was probably interested in doing like equity, justice related work. And I knew that there's a very high chance that if you're not highly trained, you have the potential to fail students and to harm students. And so I really didn't want to do that. And I was terrified of doing that to the point where I did not even work. I wanted to work directly with children my first year post-grad, and then was like, no, like I'm too scared. I'm too scared that I would have too much of an influence in their lives, which was maybe a little paranoid. But so I ended up doing a year of AmeriCorps with Friendship Academy of the Arts, where I now work part-time. And I just did I run their social media, I write grants, stuff like that, but I got to be in the school every day. And it was amazing. And I was, at the end of the year, I was really 100% sure, like, I can do this and I want to do this. But then I wanted to take another year to be extra sure. So I started working in Minneapolis Public Schools as an AVID tutor. So I work alongside teachers, kind of like what Ella does, sort of, but not quite the same. But it's by and large, I have a lot of kids that have come from Seward, so like I know your kids. But it's for me, it was the right decision because it helped prepare me for the decision to go to grad school and just to be extra sure. Because for me, the worst thing would have been being like, oh, I just spent time with these kids, I built relationships with these kids, and now I realize that this is really, really hard and I don't want to do this. So that was my thought process, but it's different for everybody, obviously.
Yeah, I could add on to that. I knew that going to grad school was probably something I wanted to do, but I did not want to go right out of undergrad. I wanted to take some time and like just gather some real world experience working and kind of just as there are a lot of, it's different by country and by program, but like typically teaching abroad is like for like it's a 1 year contract and you can renew the contract if you want to like the next year. So I decided for me, like this was a good span of time. I could spend 1 year working and teaching, and that could kind of give me a feel for, do I like teaching? Do I like working with kids but not teaching? Do I want to go back to school now that I've had a break from it? And so I kind of signed up for something that would give me a little bit of time to kind of feel it out without making a commitment to something and realizing it wasn't what I wanted, or making a commitment to something and then realizing this is kind of what I want to do. Now I can take more steps to go down that road.
Okay. Any other panelists want to jump in on that one, or not so much? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So students, if you want to type it in the chat, or you can feel free to ask it with the mic.
We also have questions
Yeah.
prepared, so if you do not want to speak or feel uncomfortable on Zoom,
Yeah, we've got some
something.
questions too.
Yeah, but we want to make sure that you get your questions answered.
We'll ask one of ours. So were there any special people or mentors who you leaned on for support? I know Jackie talked a little bit about this already, but when you first started your career or were just getting into things, would you recommend connecting with other Mac alums in education, or who are the types of people that have really helped you in your professional career so far?
We can talk about that, and then I see another chat box question. So as I mentioned, my spouse is a teacher, teaching math and special education, and I would say that he has been a really big influence and mentor, because one of the reasons that I was interested in public education specifically is that it felt like a very tangible way of living out my ideals. It felt like a really tangible way of doing anti-racist work, of doing work on behalf of people with severe disabilities. And so that was something that I wanted to pursue, wanted to see in my work life. And he similarly, he's graduated from Hamlin in 2007 with a teaching license and went straight into teaching when he was 22. His goal, he became a middle school math teacher, was that he wanted to, provide a quality education to students. And he, struggled. He worked in a contract alternative school for 4 years. And I'd say that there's a lot of really wonderful, fulfilling, spectacular things about working in education and working with students with disadvantaged backgrounds. But if your only goal is to like the joy of teaching somebody something and having them get it, then public education might not be for you. There's a lot of other background. There's a lot of like emotional resilience that comes into teaching. So I think that having somebody that can support your like emotional and spiritual development as you're teaching is really important.
For me, kind of finding people that were good mentors to me started with people that I would not normally have met outside of my school experience. So when I was, or I still am, but when I started at Friendship Academy, what makes that school so amazing is it's an all the admin are African American. It was founded for African American children, and the staff look like and understand where the kids are coming from. And so there was no way in which I was going to be like more knowledgeable than them on any of that. And so the best way I learned was by deferring and deferring and deferring to them and just listening, and really listening to like staff of color, and also just watching and kind of being quiet for a bit. But that's not always as easy when you're teaching, because you're kind of being asked to make decisions like quickly and on the fly. So I don't want to say that that's, and it wasn't, after a while, it wasn't sustainable for me. And people would be like, what do you think? And I'd be like, okay. But the best mentor I've had has been the executive director of my school, who gives us a lot of attention. It's a great place to work. And, but he like let me, and he hires really thoughtfully, but I have just taken so much from his influence and learning to kind of like keep quiet when I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. And then he does it and it works in ways I didn't expect. That's kind of been the lesson for me. And I wouldn't have been able to gain that mentor if I hadn't gone in with a lot of humility and knowing what I didn't know.
In terms of getting like hired and like from college and in between in the transition from college to like being an employee of the school district, I did a year of AmeriCorps, which pros and cons, you get paid nothing and it's really hard work. But I think, speaking from my personal experience and other people I know, a lot of times the people that run the AmeriCorps program are really just like strong leaders. So I had an amazing time doing AmeriCorps in Minneapolis, in like a subsection of Minneapolis Public Schools that's called City of Lakes AmeriCorps. And the supervisors of that program really helped mentor me through that entire year. And a lot of times AmeriCorps, it's like a cohort based, you're working and learning at the same time. So, you don't get to put anything in savings for a year, but it opens a lot of doors to working in education in the future, recommendations, mentorship, stuff like that.
For me, when I moved to South Korea, there was a community of teachers that were like already there. So I had to come up with all of my own lesson planning with like very little input from the actual schools where I was teaching. So I definitely reached out to the people who had been teaching English there as a foreign language for years already to kind of figure out like how would have you recognized that worked or didn't work, and how did you set up your lessons so that I can kind of see what works best for me and my style. I know the question had said something, the original interview question, or the panel question said something about, would you recommend reaching out to alumni, like Macalester alumni too? And I would say yes, if you go to like the Career Development Center and like help you identify an alum who has something in common with you, or something that is doing something that you're interested in. There's nothing you can lose from reaching out, really, because the worst that happens is that the alum says, sorry, I can't talk to you right now, or sorry, I can't help you right now. And you just don't gain anything, but you don't lose anything. So I think that there's kind of like a general like fear of the unknown talking to all these people, that like, why would someone who graduated 7 years ago want to talk to me about this experience they had or anything like that? But definitely, there's nothing you can lose from reaching out to alumni. And as you can see by the alumni in this panel, that like we're more than willing to, talk to you about our experiences. So definitely talk to alumni. And if they don't have the knowledge or the answers, they probably know someone who might, or can connect you in some other way to help you find an answer. So we're resources for you. We're resources for each other. I reach out to alumni myself when I have questions about certain things. So yeah, we're a resource for you. So I just wanted to say that too.
I might add to the alumni thing. I mean, I think that's really awesome. I was lucky to have a Mac alum at the same school that I was working at in the same subject area as well. So Trey was a really big help to me in that. I also reached out to a lot of kind of over the summer before I was starting, I reached out to a lot of my teachers from elementary school, and just I like sent them Facebook messages and just was like, hey, this is where I'm at now. Do you have any advice? And all of my elementary school teachers wrote me back with little tidbits of advice, and that it was, I honestly started tearing up a little bit. It was like really a nice throwback to my education, and just made me realize that I know so many teachers, and there are so many people in the world who I've had as teachers who are more than willing and happy to give their opinion about what they're doing and how to help you moving forward. So that's another place that you could reach out to people who have probably been teaching a really long time.
All right, thank you all. So let's go back to the chat. So if you all could, if you have a teacher's license, talk about what that process was like to get your license. And then if you don't have a teacher's license, or maybe before you got your license, how you marketed yourself in interviews. That would be, I kind of combined those two into one, but you can kind of tailor it to whatever your background is.
I have a teaching license. I actually got a teaching license. Ella, I liked your comment earlier about livable wages. I got a teaching license because I needed to make more money to support a family. So there was a really practical aspect to it. I actually went through a program called Grow Your Own, which is Minneapolis Public School program in partnership with the University of St. Thomas. And it's a condensed 15-month program that was targeted at special education staff, or actually I think just non-licensed staff in general. So that could be special education staff or associate educators like Ella, or even food service staff, people who already had bachelor's degrees and wanted to become teachers. And it was a really wonderful education experience. It was a cohort model, so I was with 15 other people who had been, from ages 26 to 56, who had been working in public schools for, anywhere from 2 years to 20. So I learned a lot from my classmates there. And through that, I got a master's degree, although before I was accepted into that program, I had applied to and gotten into Augsburg University, and was planning on going through graduate coursework there while I was working as a special ed assistant. I'd say the big thing to think about when you're considering a teaching license is student teaching. Before you begin a teaching program, I recommend really understanding what the requirements are for student teaching. Some schools will let you, like Augsburg and Hamlin, maybe. Some schools will let you student teach in your own classroom, so you can get a teaching job, student teach while you're being paid as a teacher. Some schools, like the University of Minnesota, will not. So I worked as an assistant for somebody who got 2 licenses through the University of Minnesota and had to do a separate student teaching semester for each of those. He was student teaching, working at Best Buy in the evenings, and putting his mortgage on his credit card in order to finish his teaching degrees. So if you are thinking about getting a teaching license, I would highly recommend knowing exactly what hoops you're going to have to jump through in terms of student teaching, because it can often be an unpaid 6-month experience. And then marketing yourself for teaching jobs when you didn't have a teaching license. I've never done that. But I have opinions about it that I could talk to you at length, Olivia. I would say that it is definitely possible to get a teaching job without a teaching license, especially with the more broad teaching licensure law that went into effect last year. The thing to be aware of is that there are some schools that will hire anybody and aren't really interested in supporting you. They're really interested in filling their classroom so they don't have to pay for a substitute. So I would do a lot of research on the school that you're looking at and see if you can get sort of third-party opinions about it. And I'd be happy to, I could talk for like 30 minutes, so I'm just going to stop there. If you want to hear me talk more about that, contact me later.
Oh, I just wanted to plug this quickly because I am graduated and I get messages from them like all the time on like whenever I like log into Handshake, which I rarely do now, but when I have to, I have a message from like Carney Sando and Associates, and they are like these people that like will help you get hired with like an independent school by an independent school with like no license, and Mac is hooked up with them. So if you're thinking about teaching in an independent school, that's an option, and they'll actively work to get you a job.
ML, could you talk a little bit about what an independent school is or what that would look like?
Oh, thank you. To my understanding, these are mostly private schools. I do not know who they contract with at all. Margaret or Tony may know slightly more about that than me. I just know that they contact me all the time. That's it. But they're independent schools or private schools, by and large, not always.
And Jack, I just want to follow up a little bit. So where did you hear about Seven Hills Preparatory Academy, or who told you about it?
All of the professors in the classics department sent me the job posting within like 5 minutes of each other independently. I had to reply to them all like, yeah, thank you, I got the memo. I guess to answer Olivia's question as well, I think it is really possible to market yourself, and that Hillis's warning is a really good one. I feel like I got pretty lucky and ended up in a place that does support teachers, and I think perhaps I should give more credit to the Mac professors who sent it to me, because they knew about the school already and had already done some of that vetting. So I guess I think, yeah, being conscious of where you heard about a school and who let you know about the school and is definitely something to be aware of. And to, treat an interview also not just as a way to market yourself, but also as informational about the culture you're stepping into. Because I definitely got a really good feeling from the interview that I had with Seven Hills, and I really liked the principal and I really liked the vice principal, and I think that you can learn as much about them during an interview as they learn about you.
Thank you. I also want to follow up with you all. There was a part of the question that said about to graduate with a degree in education but not a license, and not sure what's out there for me. And ML, you talked a little bit about some roles that you did within education that you weren't actually teaching students quite yet. Could you all talk about some other roles that students could consider that maybe wouldn't be technically teaching quite yet, but still working in education?
Yes. Okay. So I've done so many of those. I'm so tired. Okay. Now I'm ready for the full classroom experience. Okay. So AmeriCorps, as was said, pays crap. It does not pay well. If you are willing to do part-time, like Reading Corps, they will let you do part-time, and then you can have a side hustle that pays more. So that's one option that I recommend to people that want to learn like how to teach the science of reading, because I know a lot of people that have done Reading Corps and they know how to teach kids to read. And a lot of people do not know how to teach kids to read, including elementary teachers. So because they weren't trained properly. So learn how to teach kids to read. Another thing is, so AmeriCorps has a lot of like Vista roles and a lot of like other student work roles. So for me, I was a Vista, which means indirect service. But again, only if you're willing to get paid crap. For money that pays more, I work in the AVID program in Minneapolis Public Schools, $19 an hour, $19 an hour, consider it. I enjoy getting paid $19 an hour, even though I'm not a teacher yet. And I work like 27 hours a week with them. And then I work a whole bunch of other hours a week with Friendship, and they pay me $17 an hour, which is really nice of them. And that's because it's a good place to work. But I don't know what St. Paul Public Schools pays hourly, if anyone knows.
Here's Hillis.
It's similar. I know for support staff, it's relatively comparable. Minneapolis public support staff start around 17 an hour and cap out in the low 20s. I think AEs start around 18 or 19 and cap out in the mid 20s, 24 or so. And I would definitely say, as somebody who graduated in the wake of a large recession, to people who are graduating at the front crest of a large recession, I don't know if I could give you better advice than to go get a union job for a public school so that you have a paycheck coming in, because all of the people, the support staff that I work with, are still being paid, even though there's not much work for them to do right now. I'm still being paid, although I'm working a lot. So if you are looking for, say, I think I'm interested in education, I highly recommend going and getting a nice solid union job with benefits that's got pay in the high teens, because you could do worse.
Yes. And also I get, being an MPS, and I'm sure you will all agree, I get those emails from like the union all the time, and I do not go to union meetings presently, but it's like, you guys are fighting for us. Thanks. I appreciate you like advocating for us. And you could be part of that too, because you certainly have a social justice hero aspect of you, hopefully, if you went to MAC. So they're available to you.
ML, to follow up on what you just said, did you feel like you had to do AmeriCorps for a year though in order to get the MPS AVID tutor role? Like,
I think it helped a lot, but now that I'm in AVID, I'm like, there's definitely people that didn't do that and got AVID. And I actually just got an email from a class of 2020 person who is not here today, but her boyfriend knows me, and she was like, hey, I might want to do AVID. Can we talk about AVID? And I was like, yeah. And she she hasn't even graduated. I'm sure she'll be great. It's a job you can learn quickly if you want to do AVID, but I can't speak to being like an SEA or anything like that. I don't know what that's like, and I imagine it's very hard, but you can do it.
So I'm an AE in Minneapolis Public Schools, but I work closely with SAs, and I know one of my roommates is the teaching assistant, which is like technically different than an associate educator in St. Paul. The jobs are sort of I think it's hard to break into a public school district sometimes because there are certainly many associate educator, teaching assistant, special ed assistant jobs available, but they will become internally available before they become available to like public admissions or not admissions, like, yeah, whatever. So for me, when I was looking for jobs as an AE, technically because I was in AmeriCorps, I wasn't looking at the internal listings. So I had to wait until the middle of July, early August to be able to apply to the assistant teaching roles, which is like kind of scary because school starts in a month. But if you can wait it out and if you can take that risk, once those jobs are open, I think that Macalester grads are certainly very competitive applicants for those jobs. So it's a little bit of a gamble because you don't know what's going to be open, but it's not so much of a gamble because you certainly are qualified if you've had any sort of experience working with kids before as an AE. And what I do is, honestly, now that the quarantine has started, I realized that my job is a lot of crowd control. I'm in classrooms with third graders, just making sure that they're sitting and, doing their work. And if they can't sit, we go in the hallway and we do jumping jacks. And, I do lunch duty and I do recess duty and I do small group tutoring. So my job is less curriculum based and more one-on-one sort of meeting needs.
And tell me if I'm talking too much, but my job when I was a special education assistant, I primarily fed people and changed diapers. So there are, like, being an assistant in a public school can look a lot of different ways. My job was really more of a caretaking role because I was working with students with really significant disabilities. So, I absolutely adore caretaking and feeding people and changing diapers. Actually, if I, had $1 million, I might go back to being a special education assistant, but, know that there's a huge range of what that job can be.
One thing I'll also say about getting a job with AVID is there has been a shortage of tutors all year in Minneapolis Public School for the AVID program. And what that looks like is it's a college readiness program. And it's for students that are usually like middling academically. Depending on the school, it has varying levels of selectiveness. At my schools, they're like, everyone come in, please. There's a big shortage. So we didn't get some tutors till like halfway through the year. And I'm sure that's going to be the case this coming year. Maybe not because the pandemic is changing a lot of things, but it's very possible that they will be like, please, we'll hire you, please just apply. So consider it if you're going to stay in the Twin Cities post-grad. Oh, and also you can do it in college. So you can be a current college student and work with AVID and you can figure out hours that work for you and they'll really coordinate with you to make that happen if you're still going to be an undergrad next year.
Oh, we have another one in the chat here.
Yeah, what do you all do when you feel unsupported at work?
I could try this one. I usually just call my mom and rant a bit, and she sometimes makes me feel better and sometimes makes me feel even more unsupported. It's also I feel like in some ways the pandemic has like put this in a pretty good perspective in that I feel it feels like no one really knows what is going on right now or like how distance learning ought to work or how it is working. And so it kind of in hindsight is making me feel like I was being supported really well before this all started, which has been a small good thing to come out of it.
So sorry, Emil. Okay. I definitely lean on the teachers that I collaborate with for support. I'm not sure how many staff members are at my school. It's sort of, it's K through 8. It's sort of a large school, and my assistant principal and my principal have so much going on that in the beginning of the year, when I had questions about my job duties or my performance, they were really good resources for that. But in terms of sort of just, musing about education and talking about certain students' needs and sort of like more emotional support, I would say I went to my the teachers that I work closely with, and also people who are also in my position, other AEs, right? They might not even work with the students I see, but whatever issue I'm experiencing, they also are experiencing that issue with different students. So I've built a lot of community with the people that are work in my position in my school. Sometimes I feel like I'm at the bottom of the food chain, which unfortunately I sort of am, considering my assistant position and considering how large my school is. But yeah, just, finding community with the teachers and staff around you.
I might just add on to that real quick that I think what Ella said about the teachers like around you is really important. Like the classrooms, the two classrooms closest to my classroom are the two fourth grade teachers, and they've both been teaching for over 20 years and have just been a really wonderful resource and are really kind and willing to talk to me about the kids we have in common that are going through similar things in both of our classrooms. So I think that is a huge thing that I found really helpful, is really forging relationships with the teachers that are just like physically closest to me, has made it so I can just like literally walk out my door if I and at the end of a class and go talk to someone who knows exactly which kids I'm working with and when.
Yeah, I'm going to say the exact same thing, really. The other English teachers that were in my area where I live were just so invaluable for me, because they would be down if I was just needed to go out to dinner with someone and just talk about something and vent about a frustration that I was having, or some way that I felt like my school was kind of throwing me to the wolves and expecting me to do things when I'm not fluent in the language everyone around me is speaking. They were really helpful in just like helping me take care of myself as a person. So letting me blow off steam if I needed to, or like multiple heads thinking to solve the same problem is better than one head thinking to solve a problem. So if I had trouble, like there was some specific thing I was supposed to teach and I just for the life of me could not figure out a way that would work with my students, I could, by like collaborating with other teachers that also, we were all teaching English. So we were all teaching generally the same material. They were able to like make suggestions like, oh, well, when I got to that unit, I did this activity, which I found worked really well with my kids, because her kids were, like students that needed to be doing like physical activities. Like they couldn't be sitting and reading. They had to be like doing something that they were like kinetic learners or kinesthetic learners. And so like that kind of sharing of ideas was really helpful, because like if you're trying to solve a problem and someone else has already solved the problem, like, you can just share solutions instead of having to reinvent the wheel. And a lot of the struggles that we faced were things that all of us faced, like being someone, in my case, I know it's kind of unique, like, because I was teaching in another country, but some of the issues that I ran into, maybe not necessarily in the classroom teaching, but like of living in another country and stuff, we were all kind of going through together, so we could, share resources and share information, and that was really helpful for me.
I agree with everything that was said, and I don't need to say anything about it, because just like go to other staff who share your experiences and will know what to do. The other thing I'll say is, and like Hillis could definitely speak to this too, like there's a reason that they put you in like cohorts when you are getting trained for these things, and that's because they can't help you with everything, whether that's by their own design or not. Sometimes programs want to exploit you, sometimes they don't. And there's a reason they give you a cohort, and it's for that exact purpose. And the other thing I would add is, oh my gosh, I completely forgot. Okay, I'm done then.
Yeah, I think people have said some wonderful things. I think that the thing to be aware of is sometimes the biggest impediment to feeling supported can be yourself. So I had an experience this year that I had a student that was joining my science calendar time for about 2 periods per week. And this student's receptive language skills were significantly lower than my students. He had almost no receptive language skills. His family didn't speak English at home. We found out halfway through the year that he actually had a severe hearing impairment. So nothing that I was saying was getting through. And the student was not successful in my class. It was like he could sit in a desk for like 5 seconds, and that was pretty amazing. And would remove himself from the desk, would hit, pinch, and scratch me, the special education assistants. And I was a little bit embarrassed that I was having a hard time having this kid be engaged in my lesson. Like, I was embarrassed, like, I've been in special ed for 5 years. Like, I should be able to do this without help. So it took me, like, I had to maybe swallow my ego a little bit, and be really, forthright and honest with other teachers, saying like, this isn't going well and this kid's not learning. Like, help, like, what I'm doing isn't working and I need help. So I think that that's one of the biggest things. I don't know that I've ever felt in 5 years at 4 schools, I don't know that I've ever felt unsupported by my team. I've had really wonderful coworkers and really wonderful principals. But if there's ever a time when I'm needing support and not getting it, it's usually because I'm not being honest with myself or not being honest with my coworkers about what the situation is and what I need from them.
Thank you. And I just want to mention to the students, if you scroll all the way back to the beginning of the chat, the panelists have put their contact info in there if you wanted to reach out afterwards, just for more one-on-one chatting, or if you had any specific questions that you wanted to email them, just so you know that that's there. But any other questions from students at this point? Okay. Margaret, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask, or? No?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I think you guys have provided a lot of good information though. Like in my own, I'm a junior at Macalester. So I'm also a student, but I work for the Career Exploration as an undergraduate fellow. And I think that a lot of the questions, just like, how tangibly do you springboard from cap and gown into the real world, is really vital for students, and something that I really appreciate. Just like, how tangibly do I go about this in the best way, and just learning from other people and being like, don't do this, or definitely rely on this path, is really key. And the alumni support is the #1 way to go, I think, because people know Mac and people know how Mac students feel coming out of a liberal arts school, So I really, really appreciate it. I think this has been really helpful personally, just thinking about if I wanted to become a teacher. But I hope those students have also found it helpful. And it looks like we're having all of the alums repost their emails in the chat. So thank you so much for doing that and being so responsive to what students have said.
Yeah, I second all of that, except for the fact about being a current student. I'm not a current student. So yeah, if there are no other questions, I'm just gonna say a huge thank you to our panelists. I think I agree this was super helpful and you covered a broad range of topics. And I would really, really encourage, as the panelists did, that students, if you have further questions or if you're not sure, about maybe your path after school or things you should be doing while you're still in school. If you find someone that is doing a job that you think is really cool, please don't hesitate to reach out to them. I know it can be scary, but it is super, super valuable. So, but yeah, on that note, I hope you all have a good night. Stay healthy, stay safe. And then hopefully we can all do this again at some point. See you later. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Hope this was helpful.